croeso to you all. When I say all, two of you. And these two here, of course, well done you for coming along. This is the second session on the Ignite stage, entitled Electrifying British Industry. So it is being filmed and going to be on the app, I think, on the website at a later date. So, chairing this panel this morning is Chris Williams. Chris has 35 years service in the steel industry, and he founded the South Wales Industrial Cluster, Net Zero Industry Wales, and Electrify Industry with Make UK. I think he chairs the advisory board for the UK's Industrial Decarbonisation Research and Innovation Centre, and he's recently launched Sustainable Industries Limited. So, thank you so much for coming along. Chris and our panellists are here till midday, and I think we'll have a Q&A session towards the end. So, Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. So you know me, and welcome to the panel session on electrification of British industry. I thought I'd just start off by making it clear what we meant by electrification, and that is typically replacement of a gas oven with an electric oven if you're a biscuit factory, for example. So it's taking your fossil fuel burning plant and replacing it with an electrical equivalent, and that could be a biscuit oven, it could be a boiler. Obviously different parts of your processes are heated in different way in different technologies. Electrically are becoming more and more prevalent. So it could be industrial heat pump, it could be infrared heating, it could be induction heating. There are various different technologies that electrically can replace what you do with your gas heating, your combustion processes at the moment. It's typically for a manufacturing process, of course, it's typically a big challenge because you're replacing typically your whole process. It's not just a modification. Normally you will have to rebuild your process to electrify. So it is a big investment for an industrial plant to make, but also it brings many efficiency benefits, and of course it fits in with the decarbonisation and net zero drives, and it also aligns, I suppose, to the energy security world that we see in the future with renewables generating and industry then, as it transitions from natural gas to electrification, becomes a major demand for electricity off the grid. So there are many challenges in that process, which we'll talk through as a panel session, just to make the point as well that this is not anti-hydrogen and it's not anti-CCUS. We very much all see this as a journey with all technologies developing forward, and I suppose the main point as well is that all of those technologies require more electricity. So in lots of ways we've got the same challenges. We need more grids, we need more skills, and we need electricity prices typically to change in the UK. So I'll now introduce the panel, and we'll talk through, each of them will talk through an overview of their specific areas. We have thankfully got a nice mixed panel, and we'll talk through, introduce, and then we've got some set questions, and then we've got some questions for the audience as well. So I'll hand over to Mateus first, please, if you can give an introduction and an overview. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. So my name is Mateus Oliveira. I work in the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. I'm an Industrial Decarbonization Strategy Manager in the department, and my team looks at what we can do in terms of a government to electrify or support electrification of industry going forward. We do have an industrial decarbonization plan that we intend to publish soon. So I'm going to do the civil service thing, which is to say soon we're gonna do that publication. And then it's important to say that in that plan we will outline our expectations for the fuel mix in heavy industry going forward towards 2050. And it's going to be something very similar to what the Climate Change Committee has already published, which is, I think, 59% of decarbonization of industry will need to come from electrification by 2050. So that's very similar to what we are going to endorse as part of our vision for the sectors. And then it's also important to say that hydrogen will play a role in decarbonization, but it will be a much more targeted role than previously thought. We have an industrial decarbonization strategy that was published in 2021, so the vision there was for a much higher role for hydrogen, but because of the new developments in technology, we believe the electrification route is the most cost efficient for many areas of industrial processes. Then it's also important to say that, as Chris was alluding to, there are challenges with electrification, especially making sure that it's the right economic choice for an industrial site. The first challenge, as everyone might be aware, is the cost of electricity in this country. And the second challenge is access to the energy infrastructure, so having a grid connection. We already have an industrial strategy that has been published this year, and in that we have two initiatives to provide some support and some breathing space for industrial sites to have cheaper electricity. One of them is the British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme, so the BICS. The point of that is to provide up to £40 per megawatt hour of subsidies to industries that want to have cheaper energy. This will cover around 7,000 businesses across the UK, or energy-intensive businesses across the UK. It will cover sectors that previous schemes did not cover. So that's one thing. The second thing is the enhancement of the supercharger. So at the moment, sectors such as steel, glass, chemicals, some parts of chemicals, they do have discounts to their network charges of 60%, and we want to increase those discounts to 90% as of next year. So hopefully that gives already like the first step, the first support we can provide to tackle that problem. Going beyond that, we do want to consult on further support that we can provide specifically to electrification of industry. We will announce more in this space in the coming months. And also the second thing I want to say is the fact that the grid has been through a huge reform, not only reform to make sure there's less of a queue into the grid, but also a reform in the way NISO operates and Ofgem operates. So they are coming up with a series of plans to make sure that now we're going to anticipate investment into the grid, not just generate investment based on current needs of the grid. That's why we have the centralized strategic energy plan. I'm sorry, I'm not the one coming up with these names, by the way, like they're very long. But then there is the spatial strategic energy plan, which put together will form part of this new approach to increase transmission capacity for industrial sites going forward in an anticipatory way. And then there are the regional plans, 11 plans in England, 9 plans in England, and then there will be a Welsh plan, energy plan, and a Scottish energy plan, which is for the low voltage network. And the point there is to inform and help align DNO distribution operators with anticipatory approach to the grid. The other thing I want to say as well, like many people may be concerned with is like if I'm thinking about electrifying my site, or I'm thinking about like what I can do when the government announces its new plans in this area. What is my first step? What is the first thing I could be doing? Well, the first thing I would say is start thinking about what could be my peak energy use in an electrified scenario, and when could my site electrify. It doesn't need to be the best calculation. Doesn't even need to be precise. It needs to be an estimate, even if it's a very rough estimate, and even if you are being very conservative about the figures. But then do it and send us this information. DESNIS, send your local RESP team. Each region has a RESP team created by NISO that you can contact, and you can also send that through to your DNO, the DNO you engage with. Send that basic information to us. NISO will be putting in place in development register as part of their RESP process next year. So engage with that. Make sure that you're registering in that database your basic understanding of your site once it electrifies. Like I say, it doesn't commit you to actually doing what you expecting in those plans, but it does help a lot our planning. And the final thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to pass over to the other ones in the panel. The hydrogen strategy there will be a hydrogen strategy published by government, probably in a similar time frame as the industrial decarbonization strategy, and that could also give some clarity to the market as to the new role, more targeted role of hydrogen. Yeah, so that's what I want to say, to set the scene on some of the things we're doing, and then I'm happy to take any questions and go continue with the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mateus. I think some really important guidelines there and advice for industry to pick up on, particularly about speaking and talking to your DNO now to make sure that your DNO is aware of what your electrification plans might or could be. I now hand over to Lucy from Electrify Industry, the voice of electrification in the UK.
And the voice of UK manufacturers in the UK. So, hi, I'm Lucy Adams. I am a policy advisor for Electrify Industry. We're an offshoot of Make UK, which is the trade association for UK manufacturers. And Electrify Industry came about in no small part due to our work with Chris and other researchers, and realizing that there isn't, or wasn't at the time, a unified voice around electrification where there might have been around hydrogen, nuclear. And in no way to be in competition with those options, as Chris mentioned earlier. It is more about creating fair access to a choice and creating parity between electrification and other choices. So the number one problem, as Mateus has mentioned, we all know, it's the price of electricity. So 46% roughly higher than the global average, about 4 times higher than the US. So we are asking for a reduction in that, as is everyone. But it's not just about a reduction. We know that DESNZ has introduced some schemes. We've got the British Industrial Competitiveness Schemes. It's about the broadness of those schemes, who can access that. It's, of course, vital to protect those energy-intensive industries. But what we really want to do is expand that so that we also protect the supply chains for those industries, without which, we won't get very far. And to lead on from that, I think the schemes that are in place or that are going to be in place, the way that they're designed is really important. And that's, about simplicity, accessibility, consistency. As we know in the past, uncertainty around policy and schemes has been a bit of an investment killer and continues to be, despite issues around price and connection. So I would argue that, yes, price and infrastructure are 2 key issues to electrification, but really that the third one is that uncertainty, investment uncertainty and policy uncertainty, which I feel like there is a lot of positivity around the future of at the moment. And yeah, as we've said, connections, infrastructure. I think it's important to make sure that we are focusing on distribution side. That is those smaller businesses, those small and medium firms. There has been a really huge focus and needed focus on generation in the past years. That's clean energy generation, and I think now there needs to be a little bit of a shift towards, well, who's going to soak up all of that generation, and is it going to reach those small and medium distribution side users? So yeah, overall, price, accessibility of schemes, and demand side connections is what we're focused on trying to improve.
Yeah, I suppose I'd just come back a little bit. In the introduction where I was introduced as I founded the South Wales Industrial Cluster, because a lot of industries in South Wales were exploring CCS, exploring hydrogen, but also a lot of them were, Chris, we're part of multinational global groups and around the world are our sister plants are looking to electrify. That's what our corporate group wants to do. It's just in the UK, we're not moving anywhere because of the electricity prices so high. So we're not planning yet to electrify in the UK. So we're stuck. So that then, I suppose, drove that need for this voice for electrification of industry, to lobby government to put that collective argument together, to London to say that industry needs help. On that point then, we've also then raised grid. And of course, as manufacturing industries, we look at grids, but of course then what grid needs is equipment and its own supply chain to electrify us as manufacturing sites. So I'll now hand you on to the maybe the most important member of the panel, in that Nicolas hopefully can provide the equipment that a lot of our manufacturing sites will need to get the grid connection that they need to electrify.
Thanks, Chris. No pressure. So thanks for having me. So Nicolas Pitrat, I'm the CEO for Brush Group. And to an extent, I sit really on both sides of the fence. Brush Group, we do design, assemble and test. We manufacture electrical equipment, so grids, size equipment, transformers and switchgear. We operate extensively with all of the DNOs across the country at our various sites in South Wales and in the Midlands. And we also offer a wide range of engineering solutions. And why did I say I'm on the two sides? Well, actually, I struggle with electrification of my own sites. I do have the challenges around the cost of electricity. Having access to connections, even for us, is a challenge. So I am on the recipient of some of those challenges, but we're also a significant player in actually building electrification. Today, the Brush Group is what we call in the UK for the UK. We work across all the regional patches, all the DNOs. We work with data centers, we work with industrials, we work with commercial customers. Really, we're in the business of building connections and decarbonizing the buildings of our customers. What we offer starts from a brand new connection for a DNO at 132 kV. We can design, we can procure the equipment, we can build a connection, but we also offer extensive mechanical, electrical, and public health services for our customers to design and decarbonize their buildings. Through our engineering consultancies, we've got expertise in passive house, we've got significant expertise in national critical infrastructure in supporting customers in their path towards decarbonization. But Chris is absolutely right. The supply chain is very often, or the DNOs and the lack of connection is very often pointed as the biggest driver in delaying industrial electrification, together with cost. And the reason I wanted to be here this morning is really I want to flip that on its head. I want to remind everyone in the audience that actually there's a reason why the energy segment is the fastest growing segment in the economy in the UK today. There's huge demand, there's great opportunities for us, and really there's significant levels of investment. And this doesn't mean adding cost to the end user necessarily. It also means de-risking. As a manufacturer, I've had the pleasure of going through the very sharp price increases that happened in 2022 with the war in Ukraine. This has almost killed the industry. The challenges that we face today in terms of supply chain are absolutely huge. And this is why really over the last 4 years as a group, Brush has completely refocused on the UK. So majority of our supply chain is in the UK. We design all our engineering workforce is in the UK, and we try to focus our customer base on the UK because this fundamentally de-risks our supply chain. We understand the market, and that allows us to have a lot more agility and better support customers. It is a constant challenge, very clearly, but what we find is if we don't offer necessarily the cheapest solutions, we offer the flexibility, and the total cost of ownership for our customers comes down significantly. And to me, this is part of the discussion that we need to have today. And I think there's that mindset of more private investments and less public support. But we need to remind ourselves that it is not just about the politics around net zero or energy security. Actually, there is a really, really strong business rationale for that. The electrification that's been going on for the last 20 years, that happened before we started talking about net zero. Industrial assets, electrical assets are being used more and more. Hospitals are electrifying, industries are electrifying, and all of this is increasing the demand on the grid. And as a market, as a country, we need to keep investing. This is the best way to de-risk. And the last thing I say in this introduction, so I've seen some data recently, which is quite interesting as everyone focuses on the price of electricity and the cost of electrification. Everyone says it's higher cost than gas. But actually, if you take a step back and you look at the amount of investment that would have been required to bring the gas infrastructure and the gas generation to what power demand exists today, it's actually higher than the investment in electricity that we've gone through. So I think there's a mindset that we need to change, but I really want to be here to publicize the opportunities for a business, for the UK PLC essentially, to drive that electrification and drive a great success.
Thank you, Nicolas. We are missing a panel member, unfortunately. Michael from the Committee on Climate Change was due to come, but he messaged me last night. Unfortunately, he's gone down with flu. So he didn't think he could make the panel, and B, he didn't want to spread it to the rest of us either. But I know Michael was going to give a sort of global perspective on what was happening with electrification of industry and what the Committee on Climate Change's recommendations have been around the importance of industrial electrification and putting, I suppose, a bit of pressure on the government to try to unlock some of the policy levers which Mateus has talked around in terms of what can it do with electricity price, what can it do with grid, what can it do with supply chains. But I suppose one area we haven't talked about then is skills. So I'll go on now to a set question on skills. What we know is with the government's focus on 2030, a huge amount of renewables, clean power 2030, huge amount of renewable projects going in. On the demand side, we know we've got domestic heat pumps, we've got EV charging stations. So there's huge opportunities for electrically skilled people at the moment on the supply side. But then as the demand side in terms of domestic and vehicle and now industry starts to electrify as well, there are even more huge opportunities for skills. So just wondering if the panel could pass some comments, please, on what your thoughts are on skills.
Yeah, well, I can jump in again from experience, and I will just give you one data point. The hardest role to fill today, as far as I know in the UK, is that of an electrical engineer. So it can take up to a year to find good qualified electrical engineers, especially on the high voltage side. So really that's can ask anyone who's looking at university courses today, electrical engineering, this is a career for life. There's growth, there's opportunities for the next 40 or 50 years to deliver that. And if I look at the industry today, again, we talk a lot about the supply chain, but this is not just a supply chain in terms of product. We start to struggle from HV designers. We can't find sufficient people to actually install and commission the sites. We can't find enough engineers to design the products that feed into those sites. And we can't find enough qualified engineers to take the path of a senior authorized person to sign off. So for us as a group, as I said, up to a year and a half almost to recruit some senior electrical engineers. On the flip side, we've got probably 7 or 8% of our workforce today is made of apprenticeship. So the apprenticeship is really being revived in the UK, and that's a great opportunity. I would really encourage more and more of those apprentices. But there's so many apprentices we can take. We need to have the infrastructure. We need to make sure that we train people in the right way. So electrical engineers are absolutely fundamental. But I think what we need to look at is what is going to be the demand tomorrow. We can barely support what we have today. If we think about electric vehicles, building a charging station in a motorway, this is the same power demand as a small city. Data centers was mentioned previously, so the corridor, the new corridor between Newport and Bridgend. This is creating huge demand. We've seen recently the first 1 gigawatt connection request for a data center in the UK, and that's just going to go up. All of this infrastructure is going to add more and more. And for the moment, we've been focusing on the generation side of the grid. We now need to focus on the distribution side. So really great opportunities. And if there was ever a job for life, this is where it is.
Thanks. I think just to add to your point on apprenticeships, I agree. There's been a really positive shift in focus from government towards the importance of investing in apprenticeships. I think from a wider perspective, there's still work to be done in terms of skills for manufacturing. I think skill shortages in manufacturing, a lot of those skill shortages are the same skill shortages that we need for electrification. So I think in terms of apprenticeships, maybe a little bit more flexibility for upskilling for who can access those. We've been asking for a long time for that apprenticeship pots to be ring-fenced so that industry are really getting back what they're putting in. But then further to that, I think this point that you're making, Nicolas, about us focusing on the generation side, the Clean Energy Jobs Plan is such a positive step. It's got huge investment in electrical engineers, and I think there's 31 key job areas that I'm sure you'll talk about it, Mateus, but that are being invested in. And I think it's just important at this stage to make sure that manufacturers and industry are benefiting from that investment as much as generation and the supply chains for that generation, as important as that is. And so maybe we need to be looking at the ways that these apprenticeships are designed such that maybe there is transferability between manufacturing and other key areas that electrical engineers, welders even are in shortage. So making sure that the voice of manufacturing is within that plan and that there's not more pressure placed on them and those skill shortages because of this investment in generation.
Yeah, just to complement a few things, I think this point on skill, it's going to be an ongoing engagement process on this topic going forward. After we publish the industrial decarbonization plan, we do want to have a stream of engagements with industry and other stakeholders to make sure that whatever we say in that plan and whatever else is needed, we can continue to work on. And this point on skill is like one of the areas where we notice much more than before. You already made the mention to the Clean Jobs Energy Plan, so I won't go too much into that, but just to say that there are signs that we are recognizing the need for support. We already earmarked £100 million for engineering skills training in that plan, but I'm sure you guys are going to say much more is needed, but I think it's just one point of evidence that we are at least aware of the problem. There's also the industry strategy, which also made a huge point about skills and already earmarked 1.2 billion a year until 2029 for skilling up the workforce on the different priority areas of the economy, which includes the clean sector. But again, not saying it's enough. I'm just saying like it's just a recognition that more discussions need to be had in this topic.
Yeah, I suppose for me, I'm really concerned that the skills issue for manufacturing is hidden and it's not visible yet in the same way as it is for grid. Because of the price of electricity in the UK, industry isn't exploring electrification and therefore it's not speaking to grid and it's not planning what its skills requirements are going to be. So as soon as something comes through, and we've seen the BICS, the British Industrial Competitive Scheme, hopefully something else will come around about supporting industry Electrify. That will then unlock manufacturing industry to speak to grid and to start working out its skills requirements, which will start to draw out regional and national plans that are needed. So thank you for that one. I then go on, this is a technology conference. So if we can maybe ask the question around are there particular areas you feel innovation is needed in new tech for electrification of industry, particularly I suppose as we talk and think about grid and grid constraints and maybe electrical clustering of industry with other demand side and flexibility and how all that comes in. So the electrification tech, maybe grid connection tech and flexibility tech, and then the control systems that would wrap around that. I don't know if anybody has any comments on that.
So I can make some remarks on this briefly, but just to say that we do believe that right now, at least for medium and low temperature industrial processes, we do think the technology is more or less there. That could be, it's an economic question rather than a technological question, the electrification point. We do think, however, that there are a few types of technologies and a few types of sectors where the technology is not yet there, but we do think it could benefit from electrifying. Two examples come to mind. First one is flat glass production. So I do believe the innovation community should pay attention more to that subsector and thinking about ways to get the technology where it needs to be. And the second one is large-scale brick kilns and heavy clay production. So we do believe that right now, like, technology is not quite there for electrification, but it could be. So I think those two, like, I would say, main focus in terms of technological attention to it, really. The point about the flexibility is a very interesting one. This is something that again, a new topic that we notice it needs to be addressed, and we need to reap the benefits of consumer-led flexibilization in industry in particular. So we'll make that point in our industrial decarbonization plan, but it's very early stage. I'd say the point for the next year and the coming year, at least in the coming year, is to ensure that we are connecting as much as we can with researchers in that space, that we're getting as much research in as possible on the benefits of consumer-led flexibilization, and that we ourselves are collecting that evidence and coordinating specific types of policies that could be towards industrial sites, not just consumer-led flexibilization for anyone, but policies targeted specifically to the problems of industry in that space. So we do think that there is a balance between an industrial site using flexibility to reduce its energy costs and reduce its energy consumption, with the benefits of introducing flex to get a better grid connection, to get a better price for the installation of the grid connection. So I think it's trying to come up with a balance between these two, like, so that industry is not only saving up money, but is also helping the system work better, and by that, like, get a better grid connection and kind of help itself as well. So I think that these are the kind of sweet spot for that we think is for policymaking.
And I suppose hopefully governments remembering that manufacturing industries aren't energy companies, and so they typically speak a different language to the energy sector. So hopefully there'll be nice, easy systems and mechanisms for manufacturers to follow.
And this is really where I wanted to go. I think there's a study that's been published a few months ago that 90% of industrial processes can be electrified. So the technology is here. In the UK, we've got loads of really, really good technologies. Again, being very selfish, if I look at our products, we compete with all of the big international players. I think where there's the difference is how difficult it is for the SMEs to actually have access to that tech, how widespread or not it is, how many layers of red tape do you have to go through. And again, give you a very practical example. It takes us more than 2 years to get a product qualified to go onto the grid. That should be a lot quicker. And when you look at a subsidiary of a global company, they can navigate these complexities. A lot of the SMEs will not, and where we're going to make a huge difference is if we manage to get the SMEs into that mindset of decarbonization, that mindset of electrifying, And this, we need to make it a lot simpler and a lot quicker and remove the red tape and the cost, preferably.
I did hear from one manufacturer that's got different sites around the UK that the DNOs work in different ways. So they're having to speak and ask for enhanced grid connection in 7 different ways. So it's help like that centrally is needed.
Yeah, and I think actually just to follow on from that point, and to talk about the technicality side of grid connections moving forward and flexibility options that are, as you said, Mateus, will hopefully be expanding. It's about that language barrier that comes up again and again between the energy system and manufacturers, especially if you are a small or medium firm who hasn't considered electrification, and you know, this is a whole new world. So if you're really starting on that journey, then that's, you know, that's a barrier from the get-go. That being said, I think there's a lot to be learned from each other, and the biggest asset as an industrial member are the industry's journeys. I think the sharing of those stories and of where there have been issues or where solutions have been found that, you know, without sharing these experiences with each other, then someone who may have had a problem with a local DNO in their area before might not know that there is a way around that. You know, every DNO, yes, is working slightly differently, and we know there are some issues there. But really, a lot of what it comes down to, not to simplify it, but a lot of what it comes down to is communication. So yeah, I think really talking to local DNOs and sharing as much as you can about your plans and about what the options are, asking your other industry, local industries, what they are doing, what they have done, can go further than you might think. We're seeing people who are partnering on projects. We're seeing options come up where maybe capacity can be drip fed over years, so that maybe not your end goal capacity can be achieved straight away, but potentially you could get a quarter of that over several years, and then 2/3 of that over the next few years. There are options. I think conversations just need to be a little bit more forthcoming.
Thanks, Lucy. I suppose what I should add is a plug for Electrify Industry to join Electrify Industry and help create and push and lobby for that collective and simpler way forward. We're now running out of time, so I was going to ask for any questions in the audience. Oh yeah, we've got one.
I'm Justin James from Cardiff University from the School of Computer Science on industry engagement. So my role is focused around essentially getting organisations and academia working together and providing opportunities to students. But I mean, I think it was yourself who was talking about, you know, there's big gaps. It takes you a year to try and fill, job roles, finding the right person with the right experience. But a lot of our students tell us that, they're looking for jobs in all these companies. They're asking for 1, 3, 5 years experience, which students don't have. And now the department that I'm in, we are trying to give students those opportunities to work with organisations, whether it's through projects, they can talk about that when they're applying for jobs, which can set them at a bar where they might be at the same level as someone who has had a year's experience. But what is being done to give students those opportunities, whether it's within computer science or other, other sectors and disciplines, but so that they can, get the jobs that they need when they, so that they can have that reassurance that they will have something when they graduate?
No, it's a really interesting question, and I'm going to make it a bit broader, actually. I'm always incredibly frustrated when I hear about just transition is not working and we're losing thousands and thousands of jobs in oil and gas and they're not being replaced somewhere else. And as a manufacturer, as a group on our side, we actually struggle to recruit people. And a lot of that is communication. So we need, as an industry, to do a much better job to actually explain what we want and what we offer. I think there's also a mindset change which is happening now. This industry has changed faster in the last 3 years than it did in the 50 years before this. And I think it's been a challenge to actually accept younger people, new ways of thinking, and we're now getting there. So as a group, well, we engage with Cardiff and other universities on joint development. And surprise, surprise, on both sides, I think there's an acknowledgement that this is a great opportunity. We take a lot as a company, and we offer to students. I think one of our challenges remains for us to offer the best development opportunity for young graduates. We need to have the infrastructure in place to train them and support them in their growth. And that is where, as an industry, we were not really focusing before. So what we're doing as a group now, very practical example, but we're trying to put in place an engineering career path whereby we can take a young graduate and we have a structured way of keeping them growing, keeping them learning, and get them to that senior level that we need. But we've taken a step back and actually acknowledged that there isn't the population available at senior level, and we need to create our own luck. And I think, and I hope that a lot of your students and other university students will find that difference now across the industry, that there's a genuine willingness to keep investing in people and acknowledging that you have to start somewhere. And when you get out of university, you don't have these 1, 3, 5 years of experience. And therefore, you need to have an environment where you're invested in and you keep learning and you've got people coaching you. So that really is something that we need to work between industry and universities on. How do we get people to gain that valuable first 3 years of experience? And we're getting there, I think, as an industry. We are seeing more and more of that.
I was going to say, I'm conscious of time.
Yes, unless somebody wants to add to that.
No, only quickly I was going to say, I think, because the panel, we can all see what's going to happen with electrification of industry and the demand and the crash that's going to happen with skills. It's going to be huge over the next 25 years. Some very quickly, and hopefully that will force the UK into having to change the way things work, because there is a step change going to happen, and how that is managed, we all need to take responsibility for and work together on and collaborate on plugging the hole and fixing that problem. Because my kids are in the same position as you've just talked around, so it's very real to me as well. And I'll just finish there quickly. I'd like to thank the panel members. We're all hoping with the budget later in the week that there's some good news around electrification specifically. And I think the key messages, of course, from the panel were that as manufacturing industries, you need to start speaking to your grid urgently. You need to start understanding what electrification means to you. You need to start lobbying for skills, support and understanding and mapping and getting involved with your local industry and your local clusters, your local government, your local councils. And you need to, as part of that, understand what your flexibility capabilities are as well to help you with that grids challenge. I don't know, for Wales, we've got Net Zero Industry Wales. Speak to Ben at NZIW, and he's doing his best to try to pull this and coordinate with the DNOs in particular, and obviously Lucy from a UK level in Electrify industry. Thank you very much.